So we have almost completed our CRUD operations for this first table. And in this lesson, we're going to be doing our final, how do we update a record? Um, to do an update, we have two different approaches. I think I briefly talked about it in the first couple videos. We can use a put or a patch. And a put does a complete replacement of the record or of the entire object, and a patch will selectively just update um, the the information that you want to update or change. And so for that, I'm going to be using a patch. I think it's easier and I think it's more useful. And so in order to do an update, let's go to the documentation, and we have in connects.org, we have an update. And the update will tell us, it creates an update query, and you can update many records if you want, or just one. We're going to be just doing one record at a time. And it will return an array. It returns an array with all of the updated rows with specified columns. So it's going to give you an array back. And so one little caveat that I'm going to talk about, and we'll go into later when we're writing it, is it's going to return an array of, so let's say we're updating one record, like in this example right here. They have a table called books, and they're saying go through the database and look. This is obviously another field in the table books. And they're saying where the published date field is less than this value, let's do an update and change those all to archive. It looks like they're saying that they want all books that are year 2000 or less, they're going to change the status from maybe active to archive. And so right now, it updates one record, and it returns an array, like it says up here, of 1. It only returns this array of 1 for these databases here. SQLite is what we're using right now, MySQL and Oracle. These are all really extremely popular databases. But look, for Postgres, it returns an empty array. So in order to not have an empty array, we have to, when we write this, we have to actually be more explicit about returning information so that this isn't empty. Because we don't want this to be empty, because the client side, let's say the React developer, needs to know that there's something in this array, because that's how they're going to determine whether it was successful or not. Okay, I know that's a lot of words. Let's get to the code, and I think that'll be a lot more clear. So we've learned that it's called update. And once again, let's go back. I'm sorry. Let's go back. We call update, and we pass in the object with the changes that we want made. All right, we can do that. Let's do function update, and it requires 2 arguments: the ID of the record you want to change, and then the changes. We're going to pass in an object with just the changes. And in Insomnia or Postman, we're going to create a JSON object with just the fields we want changed. This is going to return. We explicitly have to say return here. I'm putting this in braces because I'm going to show you the Remember, I said with Postgres, we have to be more explicit about what we return. So this return is part of that more explicit approach, and I'll explain it as I'm writing it here. So first we have to say DB lessons. That's just like normal, right? In this database, look for this table, and where the ID equals ID. Of course, since they're both exactly named the same, we can use the shortcut where we just say where ID. Where ID, and now we can call the update. And what do we pass into the update? We pass in the changes. So we just put changes in here. We're going to update the record with these changes. And one way of returning a record is you can pass the ID in here. And this is a way of returning. At least you won't get that null. You won't get that null thing for Postgres. We're being very explicit about returning right here. And so let's do this first, and then I'll show you a way where we can return maybe some better information. All right. But we have to write our endpoint first. So let me save this. Let's go write our endpoint, and our endpoint is going to be server.patch instead of a put, API lessons, and we have to pass in the ID of the field that we want, or of the record that we want to change. We have always include the homies because they go together. And let's deconstruct the ID just like I always have. Equals rec.params. And we can deconstruct, or we can say changes equals rec.body if we want, or we could pass rec.body directly in. And now we call our lessons.update because that's the name of our method. And make sure that you include it up here. I don't think I did this on screen, but make sure that all these names of all these functions are included in your module exports. So make sure there it is there, and that's how we know what to call right here. We're calling that function from, and this file, just to reiterate, this points to this file, and because it points, then it has access to this. And it points to that file because up top we said lessons equals that file. So lessons equals this file. So we can just refer to it. All right. You probably already knew that, but just don't want to leave anyone behind. All right, let's continue writing this. Lessons.update. We're passing in an ID and changes, these two fields. A put or a patch requires you to use the rec.params object and a rec.body object. So it needs both. And that's why it's typically thought of as being harder. It's not really harder, it's just you just got more moving parts. So after this we can do a .then, and we'll refer to it as lesson. What's going to get returned back out of here, in our instance right here, it's returning this. So this gets returned into this variable name. We can name this right here anything we want. It's just good for, data abstraction, which is a big fancy word for name your variables after good names of the things that they actually model. And so this is a lesson we're trying to update. So we're going to call this variable name lesson. For lesson, then lesson. So we should probably check and see if the ID that we passed here is a good ID. If it's not a good ID, then we're trying to update a record that doesn't exist. So let's say if lesson, because if it goes and tries to find this where ID and it doesn't find the ID, then it's not going to return anything in here. This is going to be null. So where if lesson, then we can return a res.status of 200 with a JSON. Oh no, we can return the actual object itself. We can say lesson. Then we can say else. If it doesn't find it, then we can see res.status of 404 record not found. And then we have our catch down here. I'm getting a thing here. I don't think I need. You know what? I did this kind of weird. I needed to put this as that. There we go. You know what? Let's rewrite this because I think I got this all fakakta. Let's say let's do this again, just to be clear. Then lesson. There we go. Now if lesson else, and then we have down here our dot catch error. You can type it out error or error. It doesn't matter. In res.status of 500.json. Whoops. Message error updating record. All right, and here, if it's successful, then we say res.status of 200, and we can return the lesson. It'll just return what this function returns. We'll just give it back to the client. All right, else it can't find it. 404. Record not found. All right, so we're updating a record. We're calling that function that we defined up here. We're passing in the ID and the changes. And then what we get back from it, we're going to test and see if it's null or not. And then if it's good to go, then we just simply pass on what we got back. Else, we say we couldn't find it. And if there was an error performing at all, then we have our catch. Let's save that. All right. Now let's go update a record in Insomnia or Postman. I like Insomnia, so I'm using Insomnia. Let's go to Insomnia. Let me see. Let's do a get. Okay, let's update the second record. Let's change this to Algebra Advanced. Let's just say your boss comes to you and say, hey, we need to change this record to Advanced. You go, all right. So you do an update. To do a new one, you can just do new request. You name it, specify what it is, like say patch, and then JSON, and then name it. I've already created one, so I got one up here called update, which is a patch with a JSON. And so let's say we're changing this to advanced because he wants you to change it to advanced. We're going to hit send, and see we got back that 1, which is what we were told we would get back. We were told we were going to get back the number of records that were updated in an array. And so by putting the array brackets around our return, we sort of destructure that so we're not getting back an array. And so there. And as a matter of fact, this kind of reminds me, right here, we should say less than greater than 0. Well, let's try to update a record that doesn't exist. So let's try to update record 5. Let's see what we get back here. Record not found. Oh, so our code works. So evidently, if it doesn't return, it isn't going to return a 0. It returns a null. So this is good code here. Um, you sometimes have to test for things for what you're getting back. I thought perhaps if it doesn't update a record, it's going to return to us a 0, and a 0 isn't null, and so maybe I would have had to do greater than 0. But that's not true. Evidently, it does return a value only if it's successful, else it returns a null. So this is good code. Okay, so our return value, which was a 1 there, that lets you know that it happened. It's pretty good. But what if we wanted to return the entire object back with the changes included? That might be helpful to the client side, to the React side. Maybe they want to display the new information after it's changed without having to do another get call to the database. Well, we can do that get call right within our function. And that's by making use of this right here. So what if after we update the record, we call this guy right here and then return the entire record? Let's do that. And in order to do that, that's when we needed these curly braces. So let me give us a line here. And let me put around here. And then here. And let's get rid of, get rid of that one right there. So I got braces around the whole thing. I'm going to get rid of this trailing semicolon because what we can do, and I'm going to get rid of returning this part right here. So now, as it stands right now, this won't return. It'll do it. If it can do it, it'll do it, but it won't give us any information back. So we can also chain onto it a .then. And we can pass in an anonymous function. And in here, we can simply say return, and we'll call this guy right here, find by ID. And we have the ID, so it requires an ID to be passed in. Well, we have the ID right here, so we can call ID and save that. Now, what this does is it does our update, and then it actually looks like I didn't need those surrounding parentheses because the linter cleaned it up for me. So anyway, we can chain on to the end of this thing a .then and return a call because it'll do the update, and now it's going to use that find by ID to call the database and return whatever this returns, which it returns the first record it comes to. Okay, so let's save that. Let's go back and test this new method here. Hit save on this because we did some goofiness right here. Let's go to Insomnia, and let's see your boss comes back to you and says, you know what, dude, my bad. They want that changed back. And so let's do a get. You say, you know what, they decided not to do an advanced course. They're going to offer the intermediate course after all. You got to change that back. You go, all right, no problem, boss. Let's just do our little update. Intermediate. Now we should get something besides, oh, it's record 2, isn't it? Isn't it? I don't know. Let's look. It's ID of 2, right? ID of 2. And see, instead of that 1, now we got our entire object back, which is kind of handy. Once again, if the client side hits your API, so your React developer is going to do an Axios, dot patch, to hit this endpoint, and he's going to pass in this information, and it's going to call this code right here, and then this code's going to go off and do this and return. All right, this looks good. Let's go ahead and save and commit our changes. I use the git right here in VS Code, right? Created update helper and endpoint. And then we add all, then we commit them, and then we push them. And it goes right there and it's done. All right, excellent. In the next lesson, we're going to start writing our endpoints for the second table, which is going to be a little bit different because this table requires us to start using joins, because this table, the information in this table needs to be linked to records in this table. And so our joins that we're our queries that we're writing over here are going to become a little bit more sophisticated in that they're going to be in our where statements. We're going to still be doing this, but we're going to add another table besides lessons and messages we're going to add, and we're going to be doing joins, and then we're going to be adding information. So I'm excited to get to that, and after that, then we can start talking about routing and setting up our environment so we don't stick all of our endpoints in the same index file. So we start to separate them out and clean them out and get more in line with industry best practices when it comes to writing REST. I look forward to having you join me in the next lesson. And as always, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask them in the YouTube thread. It sends me an email right away, and I try to get them as soon as I can. Thank you very much.